The Galactic Council chamber was a construct of breathtaking arrogance. Titanium lattices stretched impossibly high, reinforced with quantum-weaved alloys that could withstand supernovae. A throne-like dais stood at its center, where the High Chancellor of the Council, Vrexorin, observed the gathering of species beneath him. Among them, the lowest ranked, the most insignificant in the eyes of the galaxy, stood humanity's representative, Dr. Elias Kane. He was a lean man, sharp-eyed and quiet, wrapped in a diplomatic suit that, despite its attempt at formality, couldn't mask the dismissiveness in the room. The beings around him were taller, broader, their bodies evolved in alien gravities, their minds sculpted by eons of technological and biological superiority. Humanity, by contrast, was a mere infant, recently warp-capable, but still fumbling in the vastness of the cosmos. And they never let Elias forget it. Dr. Kane, the High Chancellor's voice oozed contempt, a multitonal harmony vibrating through the chamber. The Council acknowledges the Terran delegation. Speak your petition. Elias knew the script. Humanity had sent him to beg, to plead, to once again request access to the restricted technological archives of the Council. Without them, Earth would remain a backwater species, surrounded by civilizations that had been traversing the stars while humans still painted on cave walls. He took a breath, stepping forward. Honorable members of the Council, he began. Earth recognizes the wisdom of the great species that have gathered here. We humbly request the inclusion of humanity in the pangalactic knowledge exchange. A ripple of laughter moved through the chamber. Some species chittered in ultrasonic frequencies, others bellowed in subharmonics that vibrated the walls. The mockery was universal. A representative from the Croel Dominion, a scaled leviathan draped in regal battle armor, leaned forward. Your kind is reckless, Dr. Kane. Every time we allow primitives like you access to advanced technology, you misuse it. The tragedy of the Zeldar Accord still echoes through the ages. The reference was ancient history. Another species, long ago, had risen too quickly and nearly obliterated itself in a singularity catastrophe. It was the Council's favorite excuse to deny others knowledge. Elias steadied himself. With respect, Ambassador, humanity has always. You butcher what you touch, a new voice interjected, this one from the crystalline Azurians. You weaponize everything. Had we granted you access to zero-point energy a century ago, you would have used it to kill each other. A rumble of approval echoed through the chamber. The Croel ambassador sneered. And now, here you stand, again asking us to give you more ways to accelerate your own destruction. Elias clenched his fists. He could feel the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. Every failure of Earth, every war, every atrocity, thrown back at him as justification for their exclusion. He could see the way the Council looked at humanity, not as equals, not even as potential threats, just inconsequential. A minor nuisance. A child at the adults' table. And he hated it. But what they didn't realize, what they had never realized, was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its history. It was in its outliers. The minds that saw past rules, past laws, past limits, and Elias Kane was one of them. He lowered his head, disguising the flicker of a smile. They would regret this. They would all regret this. 2 years later, the edge of known space. The research station Kane 1 was an abomination of secrecy. Built inside the gravitational void between two dead stars, it was undetectable by conventional sensors. It was here, in the darkness beyond the Council's gaze, that Elias had spent the last 2 years defying everything they had decreed impossible. And now, standing before his creation, he felt the first stirrings of something ancient. Something powerful. The machine loomed before him, a vast, spiraling construct of quantum-stitched alloys, its surface rippling as if reality itself was unsure whether to obey its presence. It was the culmination of stolen knowledge. Scraps of data smuggled past Council sensors, reverse-engineered from the smallest traces of forbidden science. Elias had taken their secrets, dismantled their arrogance, and assembled something none of them could have imagined. They had denied Earth access to their archives, their sacred technological vaults, their centuries of innovation. It hadn't mattered, because humanity didn't need their permission. His lead scientist, Dr. Aisha Voss, stood beside him, her expression unreadable. You know what this means, she murmured. If we activate it, there's no turning back. Elias exhaled slowly. We've been on borrowed time since the moment we set foot on the galactic stage. The Council sees us as nothing. We're about to make sure they never ignore us again. He reached out, his fingers brushing the control panel. A single command would bring the machine to life. A single pulse of energy would rewrite the laws of war itself. Aisha hesitated. If this works, we won't just be a threat to the Council. We'll be a threat to everything. Elias turned to her, his expression cold. They mocked Earth's children, he said softly. Now they'll learn what happens when you underestimate the monsters you create. And with that he pressed the button. The machine awakens. The moment Elias Kane activated the device, reality protested. A hum, deep and primal, resonated through the chamber, like the growl of something ancient waking from its slumber. The structure of space itself twisted around the machine, rippling as unseen forces bent and fractured in ways that defied physics. Dr. Aisha Voss sucked in a breath. Power levels are spiking past predicted thresholds. I know, Elias muttered, eyes locked on the growing distortion. The machine, the culmination of stolen knowledge, reverse-engineered equations, and humanity's defiant ingenuity, was doing something no technology in the galaxy had ever done before. It wasn't creating energy. It wasn't destroying matter. It was rewriting the fundamental rules of existence. The Council's archives had been carefully guarded to prevent species like humanity from playing with forces they didn't understand. But Elias understood something the Council never had. Evolution wasn't about preservation. It was about adaptation. And humanity had adapted to war like no species before it. A warning klaxon blared as the gravitational sensors screamed. The station's artificial gravity field buckled for a fraction of a second, long enough to make Elias feel weightless, before stabilizing again. Aisha swore. Gravitic distortions reaching unsafe. Then the machine spoke. Not in words. Not in sound. But in a pulse of sheer, undeniable force. A ripple of energy erupted from its core, spreading outward like a silent shockwave. The station's reinforced walls groaned. The very fabric of spacetime seemed to wince. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The machine was silent. The station's power levels normalized. The air smelled of ozone and something wrong. Aisha turned to Elias, her face pale. What the hell did we just do? Elias didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the control panel, where new data was scrolling faster than human eyes could track. But he could feel it. Something had changed. Not just here. Not just in this station. Everywhere. Ripples in the dark. Aboard the Galactic Council's prime observation array, thousands of light-years away, a dozen species monitored the universe's secrets. The vast, moon-sized construct had stood for millennia, recording cosmic phenomena, charting the rise and fall of civilizations, and ensuring no unworthy species tampered with forces beyond their grasp. It was here that the first anomaly was detected. High Observer Zithelrun, a being of shimmering neural filaments encased in an exofluidic shell, tilted its massive head as the readings flashed across the data walls. Report, it intoned, its voice a symphony of overlapping harmonics. One of the junior analysts, a bipedal Lutheri with bioluminescent tendrils, shivered as it pointed to the display. We don't know, Observer. But something just moved. Zithelrun narrowed its eyeless gaze. Moved? The analyst gulped. Yes, Observer. A disturbance in spacetime itself. Not an explosion. Not a wormhole. Something else. A shift. The chamber was silent. Then Zithelrun's filaments darkened, a sign of deep concern. Where? The analyst hesitated before speaking the words that sent a chill through every being present. Sector Theta 9. The Terran Exclusion Zone. First contact. Again. Back on Kane 1, the aftershock of the machine's activation had barely settled before the alarms blared again. This time it wasn't from the station's systems. It was an external warning. Aisha spun toward the sensor panel. We've been found. Elias expected this. He had known from the moment he started this project that the moment they activated it, the Council would come. But this fast? He strode to the console, flicking through the data. The station's long-range sensors had detected 3 incoming ships. Fast. Armored. Council war class. They weren't coming to talk. Aisha turned to him. They'll destroy us before we can even explain. Elias exhaled slowly. Then we don't explain. He input a command into the control panel. The machine responded with a low, thrumming pulse. Aisha's eyes widened. What are you doing? Elias looked at her, calm and unyielding. Demonstrating. The first Council warship emerged from slip space just outside the station's perimeter. It was a Raltheran Dreadpiercer, a vessel designed to crack planetary defenses in hours. Its hull shimmered with phase-shifted armor, its weapons capable of annihilating fleets. Inside, Grand Marshal Trelvon of the Kroll Dominion watched the station on his displays with undisguised contempt. "The humans have gone too far," he growled. "Prepare to." Then the universe broke. For precisely 3.2 seconds the Ralthran Dreadpiercer ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not warped. Gone. When it reappeared, it was wrong. Sections of its hull were missing, not torn away but forgotten by reality itself. The warship's shape flickered, its engines sputtering as if unsure whether they should still function. Inside, half the crew screamed in horror. The other half simply weren't there anymore. Trelvon clutched his head as his implants malfunctioned, his thoughts scattering. It was like his mind was trying to grasp something that wasn't supposed to exist. He had never been afraid of humans before. Now for the first time he was. The dawn of a new age. On Kane 1, Aisha staggered back from the console. "Elias, what did you do?" Elias watched the screen where the surviving council ships were already retreating. Fleeing. "It's not a weapon," he said quietly. "It's a redefinition." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "They've spent centuries keeping us in the dark, making sure we never had the tools to rise. But the universe doesn't belong to the ones who hoard knowledge." He gestured toward the machine. "It belongs to the ones who rewrite it." Aisha swallowed. She looked at the data, at the way reality itself had warped at their touch. "They're going to come back," she whispered. "With everything they have." Elias nodded. "And they'll learn." He turned away, staring out into the void, where the stars trembled in the wake of what they had done. "They mocked Earth's children," he murmured. His fingers tightened into a fist. "Now they'll fear us." The Council's judgment. The Galactic Council's Hall of War had not been convened in over 1,000 years. It was a place of last resort, where entire species had been condemned to extinction for crimes against the fabric of the universe itself. And now, for the first time in history, a single man had brought it to session. Elias Kane. The High Chancellor Vrexorin stood at the apex of the chamber, his vast, multi-eyed form scanning the assembled warlords, fleet commanders, and sovereigns of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species. The air crackled with tension. "The Terrans have crossed the threshold," he announced. His voice resonated across the chamber, its subharmonic layers activating the listening nodes of every species present. "They have broken the natural order. They have dared to rewrite the very laws of existence." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembly. The footage from Kane 1 was displayed in a colossal projection above them, the Ralthran Dreadpiercer vanishing into oblivion, flickering back into existence, its structure fractured and its crew erased from reality. The Kroll Grand Marshal Trelvon, one of the few survivors of that disaster, stood, his scaled hands trembling with barely contained rage. "The humans obliterated my finest ship without firing a weapon. That was not destruction. That was annihilation." "Their machine did not merely destroy matter," interjected a representative of the Azurian High Clade. The crystalline entity's form shimmered with alarm. "It disrupted the flow of causality itself. That is heresy." A deep voice rumbled from the back of the chamber. "This cannot stand." Heads turned toward the speaker of the Devourers, a colossal, armored being whose species had once consumed entire planetary biospheres for sustenance before the Council had tamed them. "The humans must be unmade," the speaker declared. The chamber erupted in agreement. Vrexorin raised a limb, silencing them. "We will not waste time debating their fate. Earth will be purged." A holographic projection of the Exterminatus fleet shimmered into view, an armada of over 2,000 warships, each one capable of rendering entire planets uninhabitable. The decree was given. The Council had spoken. Humanity would burn. Kane's Gambit. Far from the Council's deliberations, aboard the hidden station Kane 1, Elias stood in silence, staring at the data stream flowing across his monitors. The Exterminatus fleet had mobilized. They were coming. Aisha Voss sat nearby, pale and tense. "There's no coming back from this, Elias." He didn't answer immediately. He was studying the machine. Its core still pulsed with the quiet hum of something unnatural, something beyond the galaxy's understanding. He finally spoke. "How long until they reach Sol?" Aisha hesitated. "Standard galactic time, 14 cycles. Roughly a week by Earth standards." Elias nodded. His expression didn't change. "Then we have a week to become something they can't destroy." Aisha exhaled sharply. "We don't have an army, Elias. We have this," she gestured at the machine, "and a handful of scientists." Elias turned to her. "That's all we need." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He tapped the console, bringing up a new sequence of calculations. The first test of the machine was crude. We barely understood what we were doing. But now we refine it. Aisha stared at the data, her breath hitching. Elias, this equation. Her hands trembled as she traced the symbols, patterns that shouldn't exist, numbers that didn't belong in any known mathematical system. This isn't just rewriting physics, she whispered. This is. Elias met her gaze. Evolution. She shuddered. If we push this further, we won't just be fighting them with weapons. We'll be transcending them. Exactly. Elias's voice was steady, but beneath it, there was something deeper. Something vast. Aisha took a step back. Elias, we're already standing on the edge of something beyond our control. You saw what the machine did. If we keep pushing. They're coming to erase our species, he interrupted. His eyes were dark, resolute. There's no middle ground. Either we become something greater or we die. A long silence stretched between them. Then Aisha exhaled. And nodded. Then let's become something greater. The transformation. Deep within Kane 1, the machine pulsed as its creators fed it more data, more power, more of humanity's collective defiance. The first test had been an accident. The next would be intentional. Elias stood at the center of the chamber, encased in a shimmering field of energy. He had volunteered to be the first. Aisha monitored the controls. Last chance to back out. Elias smiled. Not a chance. She activated the sequence. The machine awoke. The universe screamed. Elias Kane ceased to be human, and became something else. The Council's final war. The Exterminatus fleet emerged from slipspace on the outskirts of Seoul. 2,000 ships. A force capable of rendering Earth lifeless in hours. Grand Marshal Trelvon stood on the bridge of his flagship, his claws flexing as he prepared to deliver the order that would end the human race. All vessels, he growled. Begin. And then space shattered. A figure appeared between the fleet and Earth. Not a ship. Not a weapon. A man. Elias Kane. Or, what had once been Elias Kane. He was no longer bound by flesh. His form rippled, more concept than corporeal, his silhouette fracturing between reality and something beyond comprehension. The Grand Marshal's eyes widened. What is this? Elias raised a hand. And unmade the first warship with a thought. Not with weapons. Not with energy. He simply decided that it no longer existed. And so it didn't. The fleet faltered. Fear crept into the minds of warriors who had never known it before. Elias's voice rang across the void. You sought to destroy us. His gaze swept over the armada. Now you face extinction. Trelvon snarled. Fire everything. The fleet unleashed devastation upon him, planet-cracking weapons, antimatter lances, quantum disruptors. None of it mattered. The attacks shattered against something greater than physics. Elias Kane was no longer playing by the rules of the universe. He was rewriting them. And as he advanced toward the fleet, the Council learned what happened when you mocked Earth's children. You made them gods. The first to fall. Elias Kane was no longer human. The last remnants of his physical body had unraveled the moment the machine completed its transformation. He no longer existed in the same way the Council species did. Where they were bound to the chains of causality, he had become something else. A living force, a will that could touch the fundamental layers of reality and rewrite them at a whim. And now he was staring down the most powerful armada the galaxy had ever assembled. The Exterminatus fleet had come to erase humanity. Instead, it would be remembered as the place where the Galactic Council died. Grand Marshal Trelvon watched in horror as his fleet's firepower, enough to annihilate entire civilizations, failed to so much as touch the being before him. Pull back, he roared. Regroup. It was already too late. Elias raised his hand. The void between the stars trembled. And then reality bent. A single thought from Elias sent out a ripple of pure, undeniable force. The lead battleship of the fleet, the Wrath of Exorvok, a vessel the size of a moon, simply ceased to exist. No explosion. No debris. One moment it was there. The next, the universe had decided it never had been. A soundless scream echoed through the fleet as chaos erupted. Officers shouted conflicting orders, their minds unable to process what they had just witnessed. Trelvon stumbled back, his breath ragged. This is impossible. A second ship vanished. Then a third. One by one, vessels unraveled like forgotten memories. And Elias didn't stop. He was no longer thinking in terms of battle. He wasn't strategizing. Wasn't fighting. He was restructuring the battlefield at a level beyond physics. And in that moment he realized something. He didn't need to kill them. No. There was something worse than death. Elias reached out with his mind and touched the Grand Marshal's ship, the Sovereign Blade. And then he changed it. The Sovereign Blade flickered, its structure twisting into paradoxical shapes, its metallic hull shifting into something fluid, then something impossible. Its crew's screams were cut off as their very concept of self was erased. Trelvon clutched his head. He could feel himself slipping away. His memories distorting. His past rewriting itself in real time. And in his final moment before he was erased from history, he understood the terrifying truth. Elias wasn't just destroying them. He was unwriting them from existence itself. And the universe obeyed. The fall of the Council. Word of the battle spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, Council worlds received fragmented transmissions of the Exterminatus fleet being erased from existence. Panic spread through the great civilizations of the cosmos. The unthinkable had happened. The Council, the untouchable, the eternal, had been defied. In the Great Hall of War, the remaining leaders of the Council watched in horror as their last desperate fleet attempted to flee. But there was no escape. Elias was already there. He stepped into the chamber, not through doors, not through ships, but simply by deciding to be there. Gasps rippled through the room. The High Chancellor, Vrexorin, recoiled. This is madness. Elias tilted his head. No, his voice was calm. Almost gentle. This is the future. Vrexorin raised a trembling limb. Please, we can negotiate. Elias considered this. Then he smiled. Did you negotiate with Earth? The High Chancellor's breath hitched. He knew the answer. Elias raised a hand. The chamber shook as its structure rearranged itself at the quantum level. The walls melted into liquid, then into light, then into nothing at all. Vrexorin fell to his knees. Mercy. Elias's gaze was unreadable. No. And with a final thought, the Galactic Council, the empire that had ruled for millennia, was gone. The age of humanity. The war never truly began. It ended the moment Elias ascended. With the Council erased, the remaining civilizations of the galaxy submitted. Some out of fear. Others out of awe. Earth was no longer a backwater planet. It was no longer a species on the verge of extinction. It was the center of the new order. Elias Kane, the first post-human, the first being to transcend the limits of physics, stood at the heart of this new age. And yet, he no longer felt human. Aisha Voss was one of the few who still spoke to him as an equal. She had followed him through this transformation, but unlike him, she had remained herself. She approached him on the observation deck of Kane 1, where he stood staring at the stars. They fear you, she said softly. They should, Elias replied. She hesitated. And Earth? Do you still care about it? Elias was silent for a long time. Then finally he whispered, I don't know. Aisha placed a hand on his shoulder. He could still feel it, though he no longer had nerves or skin. You should come home. Elias turned, meeting her gaze. And for a brief moment, something flickered in his expression. Something almost human. Perhaps he wasn't lost yet. Perhaps, even as a god, he could still find his way back. They mocked Earth's children. Now they worship them. Loudspeaker like this story? Want more mind-bending sci-fi? Subscribe to The Void Narratives on YouTube. Rocket Fire.